I'm John DiBiase, and welcome to Disabilities Journal. I have with me today two CEOs from provider organizations. A provider organization is an organization where agencies who provide services belong so that they can combine their efforts, especially when it comes to asking for funding from the state. And from right to left, Winnie Schiff of the Interagency Council on Developmental Disabilities, and Michael Searider from the New York Alliance on Developmental Disabilities. Welcome, guys. Thanks so much for coming. I know both of these folks from my time in the field, and we worked together, and so here we are. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Let's get right into it. Tell us about the current state of the system for support for people in New York who have a developmental disability.
Okay.
Well, we have a terrible staffing shortage, and right now the vacancy rate statewide is 17%, actually above that, and the turnover rate is above 30%. And we are just having a very, very difficult time attracting and retaining staff. And it's because we are unable to pay wages that are high enough that reflect the very high responsibilities and expertise that's required in the position.
Now, this isn't like my accountant left, so I hire another accountant. The folks who work in this field become attached, the individuals that they serve become attached to the folks, okay? And they become almost friendly or friends, so that when somebody leaves, it leaves a void. It just doesn't leave, okay, I need somebody else to work the Yeti machine.
That's exactly right. Yeah, when Winnie talks about that 30% turnover rate, every time that happens, you sever the relationship between the individual providing services and the individual receiving those services. And these are some of the most services and supports about some of the most intimate details of an individual's life. Lots of things like going to the bathroom and supports going, getting a shower and things like that. But they're also, it requires a really nuanced level of understanding about an individual and their own capacities and abilities, because the direct support professional providing these supports and services really is looking to personalize the supports that they're providing to the individual, to maximize the level of independence that that person has, and to try to constantly help them gain additional levels of independence or maintain the levels of independence that they have. So they're not doing for, oftentimes they're doing with, and supporting that person to do as much as they can themselves. But every time we see that that relationship severed, we start over. You teach the new direct support professional how it is that you'd like to have your teeth brushed, how it is you'd like to be supported to make your own meal if you're able to, how it is you'd like support getting in and out of bed, or whatever supports that individual needs.
And even understanding the nuances of what somebody needs when they are possibly nonverbal. DSPs get to know what somebody needs and means when they, move their head in a certain direction.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
And I know that when I retired, I was the executive director at Anabic. You guys know that. You folks don't, though. Well, now you do. One of the folks came over to me and he was crying and he said, "Why are you leaving?" I said, "Because I got old." He said, "Well, I'm old." He said, you don't have to leave because you're old." I said, "Yeah," but he was upset because over the course of 20 years almost that I was there, we had developed a relationship of, "Hey, how are you? Hey, that's fine." He would call me up sometimes and I would go, "What's going on? Is something wrong?" "No, I just called to say hello." And you lose that connection, and that connection was important to him.
Right.
And it became important to me too, because I really miss some of the guys. I used to go in with my guitar and I said, "What do you want to hear?" And they go, "How about Margaritaville?" I said, I don't know the chords off. I could play it, but I have to get. But you develop that relationship, and a direct support professional who's in the house or in the day program constantly is even greater than the executive director who's getting in trouble because he walks in and breaks up a session.
I became a DSP about 40 years ago, And that's the reason why I'm still in the field today.
DSP, direct support
A
professional.
direct support professional, and I worked in a group residence, and the people who lived there became my family.
Yeah.
And yeah, the relationship, it's really special. And at the time, I earned double minimum wage. Now, our
Let's talk
direct
about
support
that.
professionals
That's
are
really
earning
important.
just above minimum wage because of the funding that we receive. And it just doesn't make any sense. And it's the reason why we have the staffing crisis we have.
It's kind of an incredible story, actually. When you look at this over a period of decades, these are jobs that used to pay 3 and 4 times the minimum wage when you looked at the early 80s, and now they are a hair above minimum wage right now at an average starting wage of $16.13 an hour for all nonprofit provider organizations here operating in New York State. And that happened as a slow erosion over a period of decades, and primarily because these organizations were supposed to get increases in funding from the state of New York to be able to keep pace with the rate of inflation as the economy changed. That didn't happen for a period of over 12 years. And so you saw an erosion of the field. And when we're talking about these nonprofit provider organizations, the vast majority of what they're spending money on is compensating their direct support staff. That's what they do. And so when you don't have those resources and you're not keeping pace with inflation, those wages and salaries can't keep pace with the larger, the economic dynamics that are taking place around you.
I remember trying to lobby my board for increases to the direct support, and it was like, well, we don't have that money because it's only being funded up to a certain point, and it was really difficult to support these folks as much as we can without state money.
Yeah, well, you're looking at these organizations that are, most of which are 95+% funded through government funding, the vast majority of which is through the Medicaid program here in the state of New York. So if there's going to be any major increases or any sizable increases for direct support staff, it's going to come through state funding. It's going to have to come through the budget process. And quite frankly, it's the state of New York's responsibility to provide these supports and services. These organizations do it on behalf of, under contract with New York State to fulfill that law, that statutory responsibility.
Exactly. Boards and agencies are doing everything that they can, but with no increases and rising costs in every aspect,
Right.
housing, fuel, food, you name it. The only thing that they had control over is salaries, so that didn't get the increases that it deserved.
And we're talking about executive directors that aren't, we're not talking about the folks that are making $2 million a year because they're an executive director. We're talking about execs that are making a good salary, but not an exorbitant salary. Okay, we don't have stock options. We don't have travel. There's no jet planes that take us to places.
Everybody from the top down does these jobs because of the love that they get from their professions.
Exactly.
And unlike what you see actually in the for-profit sector, when you see things like mergers take place, you pay somebody to take a walk, $1 million, $2 million. People won't walk away because they're committed to the work. It's more of a labor of love than anything else.
And sometimes my wife actually has a real job, okay? But sometimes she say, well, like, why do you do this for what you're making? And you work like hours, you're always there. And I said, because I love these folks. It's almost a vocation. It's not just a job. It's something you're dedicated to.
But for a direct support professional earning just over $16 an hour, and with the minimum wage about to go up again in January, I, as maybe a single mom, have to do 2 or 3 jobs in order to put food on my table, and it's impossible. We love our jobs, but they can't stay in their jobs because it just doesn't pay enough to survive.
Yeah. It's a tough situation, and I can get $16 an hour at a Home Goods or McDonald's with no responsibility. The direct support professionals are responsible for lives.
Absolutely.
They make a mistake with a med, somebody could die.
Absolutely.
And it happens. It doesn't happen often, but it happens. And they're very dedicated people, at least the ones that I've known in my life. They're very dedicated. They're dedicated to the people that they serve. They're dedicated to the house. But dedication ain't putting food on the table for my kids.
And when you talk about DSPs and what they're doing, what Winnie just said is that many of them are working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. And that puts enormous pressure on those individuals because they're often overtired. They're not getting enough rest. They are stressed out about their own lives and their inability to support their families. That puts incredible pressure on the system as a whole. And we don't need to look for examples of how understaffing has a tremendously terrible impact on individuals with disabilities or any other population of individuals than looking right in our own backyard from 50 years ago. 50 years ago last year, Geraldo Rivera set foot onto the grounds of Willowbrook
right.
State School and highlighted what happens when you have incredibly low levels of staffing because of the underfunding over a long period of time, and what that does to the quality of life that those individual direct support professionals support in the lives of the individuals that they support. And so that same dynamic is happening right now as we speak. It's not happening in large institutions. It's happening in homes, thousands and thousands of homes where thousands and thousands of New Yorkers with disabilities live on their own in communities across the state of New York.
You know, Willowbrook was not established as a hellhole. They
Not
didn't
at all.
say, okay, let's build something that's terrible.
It was state of the art at the
It
time.
was state of the art when it began. And the system developed as the state of the art system. We got rid of Willowbrooks and we broke up into small houses, and it's almost a home for folks. It is a home
It is.
for folks. It is. And we never want to go back to anything that becomes Willowbrook. And the funding issue is why Willowbrook became what it was.
That's exactly right. When you have these incredible staffing ratios that are insurmountable, that are unrealistic, you erode the quality of life of the individuals that you're supporting. And that can happen in really minute ways when it's we only have enough staff to be able to support people to shower at 7 o'clock at night. What happens if I'm a person who wants to shower in the morning? Tough luck. If that's the life you're living, that's a slow erosion of the quality of life, but it becomes much more severe and much more significant when we're talking about supports in eating, supports in bathing, supports with other major activities of daily living that can, if they're not done properly and correctly, like medications, can result in really in fatal errors, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to mention being able to participate in the community, which is something that we've actually had to cut back on a lot in recent years. So we've built an incredible system over time since Willowbrook closed. And because of financial neglect in the previous administration, we have chipped away at this incredible system that we built. Now, since Governor Hochul has come into office, we've gotten some increases, but we need to keep that up, and we need a correction so that all those years of no increases can, that we can bring salaries up to something approaching, not even completely fixed, but approaching a salary that's commensurate with the job that's being done.
I would love to get the new commissioner to be here and sitting right here with the three of us to discuss this, because I'm sure, again, you don't start off being, okay, I'm going to be the lazy guy.
Yeah.
You start off with an idea, and you have to be an idealist to be in this field. You can't just be in this field and say, okay, this is what I do. I'm getting up today, and I'm going to go to work, and I'll come home at 5 o'clock. That's not
Nobody's
what
doing
you do.
that.
Nobody's doing
And the
that.
commissioner's not doing that
I
either,
know
by
she's
the way.
not. I know she's not. No, that's why I said she's not.
Yeah.
And I've read some stuff about the new commissioner, and she's dynamic.
Yeah.
She really is.
That's why I would love to have her sitting here and we could talk about this, because I know that she's got some ideas.
We have an incredible advocate actually sitting in the commissioner's
Cool.
job now at this
That's
point.
great.
Karen Eifeld's been, I think, a remarkable breath of fresh air for our field, but I think that it's unrealistic to expect that one person coming in and trying to change a system that has been neglected for a period of 20 years is going to snap their fingers and make that happen.
Right.
And she, quite frankly, needs the support of the governor to do that, to make those types of changes. When we talk about investments like the ones that we're talking about here for this system, it's primarily on the governor. Being in a state like New York that has a very strong constitutional structure where the governor puts forward the budget proposal and the legislature responds to it, it's incumbent and on the responsibility on the governor to put forward the recommendations for what this field and all the other parts of the budget need to have. as Winnie said, we've seen some significant increases in this field over a period. Since 2010, we were supposed to get 30% increase in funding. In that period of time, we've seen 10%, and the lion's share of that has taken place during the Hochul administration. That's beginning to start to turn around things, but what we need to really see is a sustained priority for services and supports for people with disabilities in this budget this year, going forward into all future budgets as well.
Okay, that's the fix.
That is the fix.
And, you know, people say, well, you throw money at the problem. It's not throwing money at the problem. It's supporting the people who do perform the services. There's a frustration level, and you get to that frustration level, and all of a sudden you say, okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm out of here. And we don't want that to happen because you've got some really good people in this field.
Oh my gosh, yes. Now, there's real competition for scarce funds, especially this year in the budget. And so it's the governor absolutely is in control of the initial budget and really largely the way things turn out. And the legislature certainly participates. But we all have to lift our voices so that, you know, if we don't say anything, nobody even knows that there's a problem. You know, we're a small part of the healthcare sector, you know, and we have to speak up, and everybody has to.
You know, I said to Michael, I want to come up. I haven't been up to Albany in a while. I said,
Please
I want to
do.
come up and I'd like to maybe, we have time left. This isn't the end of the show, but I would maybe like to have you guys back right before you're getting ready to go up to talk about the budget, because that's important. We want the folks that are watching this to know that their letters to the governor saying, hey, Governor Hochul, developmental disabilities needs your support. You can call her, call your assembly people, your state senators, they work for you, you voted for them. Well, maybe you didn't.
But they represent you.
But they represent us.
There's a variety of ways people can get involved. Calling your legislator, calling the governor, one of the most important ways to do that, but writing letters, writing emails, getting your friends and your family to do the same, to articulate, to stand up and say, hey, I've got a loved one with a disability and I want to see greater supports for those individuals. But letters to the editor, and certainly, as you were suggesting, getting involved with some of the organizations like ours, but others, parent organizations, self-advocacy organizations that are organizing events at the state capitol. We've already done one this year in November. We're going to be having another one in February, another one in March, and a sustained effort to try to get people to make sure that legislators and the governor are hearing our voices as the budget process plays out, and they don't lose sight of the fact that they need to make investments in this sector, in this budget.
And it's really important to go up to Albany. And I've always said that it's important for siblings and parents to go up to Albany, because as an executive director, when I would go up to Albany, what they would hear is save my job. When a family member goes up or an individual goes up and they say, save the system, they're real people that we're talking about. They're not, you know, you can get another job anyway. You have a college degree, just, you know, figure it out. But to support people who are in need of services, it's really important.
We're talking about the lives of individuals like my brother, who lives with Down syndrome and lives in upstate New York. Christopher's life is dependent upon essentially the supports and services he gets from the organization that provides him support, and the direct support professionals who are employed by that organization. And to your point around Albany, going to Albany is a fantastic way to make your voice heard, but it's almost built on the relationships that are had and built here in the district. In the individual district offices and stuff like that. Building those relationships so that legislators, when they see you in the grocery store, they see you at the bank or wherever, they go, I know what they want, and they keep that in mind so that when they're coming back home after voting on a budget, they know what kind of response you're going to get when they see you back in the grocery store the next time.
Right. I've been at legislative breakfasts where an assembly member would be there, and he'd say, oh yeah, and John's coming up. I know John's coming up, because I'm always in their face.
That's right.
And it wasn't just my representative, it was from the representatives from around the district. What about the federal government? Is it worth going down to Washington or writing your congressman or
You.
Talk to me about it.
There's a strong role, and I think an increasingly strong role that the federal government is playing in supports and services. When we're talking about Medicaid services, that's a federal, state, and oftentimes local government share, if you will, in the process. The federal government has to increase some of those funds to be able to provide states the opportunity to provide these services and supports. But one of the most important things that we're focusing on at the federal level is actually the recognition of the direct support professional as a profession by the Bureau of Labor Statistics at the Department of Labor. Right now, they're lumped in with home health aides and personal care aides, which have a lot of similarity with the types of jobs that direct support professionals do. However, direct support professionals do more than that, in that what we were talking about before. They are promoting and supporting levels of independence for those individuals that they support on a variety of aspects of their life. We're looking for the federal government to recognize this sector, this distinct group of individuals. More than 100,000 New Yorkers are direct support professionals, and we need to recognize them with a distinct job code, if you will, so that we can also start to track that and understand what that means in terms of salaries and wages and what investments in those individuals means for the quality of life of people like my brother.
Right. And you know, that 100,000 votes.
Absolutely.
And there are many of our folks, the individuals that we serve, who vote.
Absolutely.
Okay? And that's another big block of people that we vote. I think that if everybody who had a connection with the field voted, we'd be voting as a block, and we'd be changing things.
Yep.
So that's really important piece of trying to convince people.
That's right. That's
All
exactly
people receiving services, all our staff, all our families and friends.
Yeah.
Yes, we are a force.
Well, we could be. I'm not
Yes.
sure that we are, but we could be.
Okay. Well, maybe we're an unspoken force, but we're there.
Well, and when you talk specifically about this, it's when you show up in the hundreds and thousands in places like Albany, as the budget process is playing out, that sends a message to elected officials. I got to pay attention to these issues.
Yeah.
These people are paying attention to what I'm doing. And when we make our voices heard, it doesn't have to be organized as a voting block necessarily, but it needs to be organized in such a way that it's making those voices heard. That happens already. It's probably perhaps our strongest way of advocating for these supports and services. And the more we do it, the stronger we get. So I strongly encourage anybody who's got a connection to the field, anybody who has a connection to an individual with a disability in their life, anybody who's connected to any of the organizations that we're talking about, get involved and make your voice heard. It's probably the most important and impactful thing that you can do.
And now is really the time on the state level, because we're about to start negotiations on the state budget.
Absolutely.
Right. The first of the year, the legislature goes back,
Right.
and
State of the state
right
addresses.
away they start talking about the budget.
That's right.
You know, I keep saying we because you could take the kid out of the field, but you can't take the field out of the kid. Or maybe you can for some people. Some people just do it as a
We're
job.
going to drag you back to Albany, don't worry.
Yeah, I miss it. I miss it. I couldn't do it 5 or 7 days a week anymore. I just couldn't physically, and then I got sick, and it, you know. But to be part of that dynamic, that field of actually helping people is something. Yeah, you got to bring me back to Albany.
It's powerful, and at least for me, I mean, I leave any of those events, any of those opportunities with this huge sense of being fulfilled, personally fulfilled,
Yep.
and recharging my batteries to continue this work, which is exhausting, I will be frank, but it recharges your battery being in the midst of other people who are feeding you back, if you will, filling your bucket, if you will.
Yeah, you know.
And this year, our campaign is Invest in Me. And me is the people receiving services, their families, our staff. You know, so we really need investments. So it's a very good campaign, and we're really seeking to put Invest in Me on everybody's lips.
And specifically, we are asking for a 3.2% cost of living adjustment for the nonprofit organizations who provide services, and we're looking for a $4,000 permanent wage increase for direct support professionals and others who provide direct support services in and amongst our provider organizations.
Which would be the correction for having not had that increase over that entire
Correct.
decade.
You know, Senator Padovan was a good man. He was a good man. and they say, I'm trying to get money for the worker bees. You guys don't need the money. You guys can get whatever's left.
Worker bees.
But the folks in the houses, I got to tell you a quick story. It has nothing, well, it kind of does. I went to the Ranger game Sunday afternoon with my sons, and we were walking through Penn Station. I said, yeah, this is where I used to stand waiting for the train to Albany. But to get money for the direct support, that 3.2% for direct support and the $4,000 for direct support is really important.
Yeah, yeah. It's the lifeblood of these organizations, and if we're going to make any progress in addressing those deplorable rates of vacancy and turnover that erode the quality of life, we're going to need the state to step in and make some serious investments in this workforce to, quite frankly, make up for lost opportunities in previous years that have allowed this field to erode.
Let's continue a little bit with the challenges and how we're going to fix the challenges or address the challenges. We've talked about going to Albany, we've talked about going to the district offices, we've talked about writing letters, making phone calls. What else?
I think we've probably covered most of the waterfront on those issues. I think it's a matter of getting involved here. One of the things that I have recognized, certainly since over the course of the past few years, is some of the dynamics that are playing out in our field that are larger, if you will, for larger societal dynamics that play into the dynamics at play here. Winnie mentioned before, we have a workforce that is very disproportionately female and definitely disproportionately black and brown population, primarily female women of color, oftentimes who are single moms. And I have oftentimes thought that some of the challenges that we as a field have faced have been a result of the population of people that we support. And quite frankly, one of the realizations that I've had is that it is not necessarily the population that we are supporting, but perhaps indeed more the population of people who provide those supports and services. And I'm specifically calling out, if you will, the built-in biases within our society that have devalued this work, that have devalued what have typically been work that has been done by females of the caring and support for family and others. We have devalued that, and I think that we have to be involved in the conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion that are taking place across our society, that we're going to be involved in that and be addressing those issues that are, as they're playing out within our own organizations and playing out within our own field, because if we don't address it, quite frankly, no one will. So we need to be involved. We need to get our voices involved. And I'm back to making your voice heard by a call, an email, a letter to the governor, to the legislators, and making that a regular occurrence. Building relationships with legislators is a key piece of this. And if you can do that and help educate them about what it is our field is facing and how some of those larger issues do play out in our field, I think we can find huge allies on both sides of the aisle in support of what we need for this field and the people that this field supports.
I would like to remind people that you could wake up disabled.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, and when I was in for 4 months, okay, and I was unconscious for a lot of that 4 months, but when I got to rehab, I was being taken care of by, for all intents and purposes, direct support professionals. And it was like I couldn't do stuff for myself, and a lot of our folks can't do stuff for themselves, and they need direct support professionals. And I was like, I would call my wife up and say, you got to bring coffee or cakes or something for these guys, because they're really doing a heck of a job.
It's all of the caring professions are in many of the same situation. All of us are going to be young at some age, at some point in our life. All of us are going to be, most of us are going to be old at some point in our lives, and likely we are all going to face some type of disabling condition at some point in our lives. We will all need these kinds of supports. And unless we start to talk about this from a bigger perspective societally, about the caring professions and what this means for the value that we get from making sure that people with disabilities and others are a valuable part of our communities, we have a lesser community as a result of it, and we will all pay the price ultimately.
We've got 8 seconds left. Hit me with your best shot. 5 seconds. 4.
Talk to the governor, talk to your senator, talk to your assembly member, invest in me, get in touch with our organizations so that you can get information and you know what it is we're doing and how you can join us in the various activities that we're promoting.
Make your voices heard.
Thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
I'm John DiBiase. This has been Disabilities Journal. Join us again for our next event. Thank you very much for watching.